All right. So it looks like left from a previous class, something to that effect, there's a bunch of information and pamphlets up here about study abroad. I didn't have the person come and talk to you guys, but I'll just give you a quick 30-second soapbox speech. Study abroad was literally one of the best things I ever did in my life, so it's awesome. If you can do it in your schedule, it's great. I lived in London for half a year, and I still desperately want to go back at any time. If there's ever a job opening, I'm running. But just telling you, I know we're in a technical major, so I know I'm speaking in general. In general, we have a lot more students who are a little bit more, they have a plan. They're going to get, they're getting the degree to get the job, to get the career. They're on a very much more strict path than some of the other degrees on campus. Still, if you are at all interested, if you have any interest in studying abroad at all, go ahead, take one of the pamphlets, talk to the office, and see if they can make something work. They do everything from full semester-long programs to short, like over spring break or winter interim, to even like just week-long, like spring break trips as well. It really does help you get a whole bit better international scope and see other cultures. Again, it's not a cliche, it's honest, it literally changed my life, so there's my little push for that. But yeah, so there's a bunch of pamphlets here apparently, so feel free to grab one of those if you would like. All right, let's see, what was I going to say? So on-site class, this is because the online students technically see these recordings as well, but for the on-site class, make sure you're filling out the Module 3 attendance form. Let me know if there's any issues with that. It should be unlocked now and all that. If you have issues accessing it from a personal laptop, try doing it from the actual lab machines. Their IP locked down a little bit. I think the Wi-Fi in here should still technically qualify, but it does? Awesome. All right, but regardless, make sure you do that to get credit for being here today. Online students who are listening in, you have your weekly discussion post to do for your participation credit. All right. One other thing. So, since we pushed the assignment due date for this last week back a date, I lost my day to grade all the stuff. So I graded as much as I could last night. So basically, everyone who turned in their stuff before, 4 hours before midnight, I was able to grade. But for all y'all who, went a little closer to the deadline, totally fine, well within your rights. I'll get to your stuff tonight. I didn't have time today because I came straight from work to here. So I apologize that I didn't have all of your stuff graded. Everyone was doing very good so far in what we've graded so far, so I'm not concerned at all. But I do apologize for that. I try and make an effort to have everything graded before class. But when I push the due date back like that, I lose my day to do that. So again, apologies. It should all be done tonight. Once after class, I'll go through and finish up all those. All right, Module 3. All right, so we're going to go over a little bit of Assignment 2 feedback, which, again, it went pretty well. We'll go through that. And then we have one of our first more dense PHP lectures, because we kind of gotta get through all the basics kind of aspects of PHP so we can actually do some cool stuff. So this week's lecture is probably going to be a little bit closer to how the lectures going forward will be, which will be a lot more example-based and a lot more me showing you some PHP code. We type it up together, and we see what the output is as we're going through the various concepts through the material. So the PowerPoint examples, let's see here. Should I remember to post those? Nope, the example solution for assignment 2 is also posted if you wanted to go take a look at that. But let me quickly throw up there the PowerPoint files. Week 3. Oops, can I zip that real quick? I could have sworn I already had those up there, but apparently not. So if you want to follow along with the examples that we go through, come on, there we go. If you want to follow along with the PowerPoint examples, there's a zip folder for them. You can download them all from there. And yeah, that should be good to get started. All right, this slide's out of date. This is from last year. Almost none of this actually applied. You guys actually did relatively well with the assignment. There were a couple things we'll go over. Let's see. I mean, the first 2 bullet points are pretty good generic copy-paste for this class. Again, not technically applicable with the last assignment. You guys did pretty well. But even though these first two assignments were relatively on the light side as far as time commitment goes, from this point going forward, especially starting next week, but this week as well, you're going to want to make sure that you're starting these assignments early and giving yourself plenty of time to get them done. Again, no one ever actually believes me at this point. That's fine. You'll learn soon enough. But maybe if I can get one of you to be like, maybe I won't wait until literally Monday at 10 p.m. to start doing it and freak out when I realize that's not going to happen. But resources, the IST tutors, does anyone know if they started this semester? Does anyone talk to them?
On the third floor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're started? Awesome. Okay, so the SOAS IST tutors on the third floor have walk-in hours. They're really good at helping for this type of stuff. I've had plenty of students in the past who they'll just do their assignments in those computer labs during those hours, just so that way if they have a quick question, rather than spend an hour yourself kind of stuck on it, you can just ask a tutor to help kind of walk you through some of the concepts. I mean, I started my SOAS career way back when as a tutor up there, so I mean, they're all it's completely different people now, but they're a great resource, and I would very much advise you to reach out to them if you have any questions on your various assignments and stuff, because they're going to be able to help you kind of the more hands-on. Again, they won't do your assignment for you or anything like that, but it's kind of nice to, if you're working on it, to be like, oh, hey, quick question. So, let's see. Keep file and folder names simple. It's recommended to not have any uppercase or spaces, just because if you have spaces, it throws in that special character, that %20 thing, and it gets messy. Which, again, technically isn't like bad, but it becomes an issue because we had a couple students who the link that they submitted in in their Word document didn't actually go to their assignment because there were some spaces or some extra, so the link didn't match up. So you will, again, it's this first assignment, it was just like I think 1 or 2 points or whatever off that, but you want to make sure going forward that the easiest way is just to have no spaces and just have everything be lowercase just to standardize it. But whatever you do, just make sure that your links are matching up with where your assignment is. The index file has to be named index.php, all lowercase, not assignment2 index, not index with a capital I, not homepage whatever, not index.html. It has to be index.php, all lowercase, and the reason for that is that's what allows it to auto-run when we go to that page. If we kind of look here, again at my example for assignment 2, even though this page is technically index.php, I don't actually have to type that out to go to it. If I just go to the folder that it's in, it auto-runs because I named it index.php, all lowercase. If I named it anything differently, it wouldn't work. I would end up with something like this where it just lists all the files, and that's not what we want. We want to make sure that every assignment has a proper index page, so that way it auto-runs when you go to the directory. We didn't actually have anyone who had issues between relative or absolute file paths, but I think I've got a slide on in the next page just to double check on that. Copying and citing code. This is more just because I generally forget to talk about it the first couple of weeks, so I always just throw it out here and now. Again, these first couple assignments is not that big of a deal. All the best programmers in the world find resources and other people's examples online. That's basically how you learn and do other things. Just make sure if you are copying someone else's code, like copy-paste style, make sure you just throw in a comment citing where you got it from. My warning with that is, so again, with this class, there's going to be lots of examples online that are 10 times more advanced than what we go with in this class. A very big pitfall that students will fall into is, if I ask you to do X or whatever it is, and you go online trying to find someone else who's done X so that way you can save some time because you realized you procrastinated it to the last hour before it's due, and you find an example that does X, Y, Z with a top hat or something like that, and you try and implement it with your own stuff, it won't work because you don't kind of know what you're doing with that. I'll get miffed because I know that you literally just copy and pasted someone's much more complicated stuff than yours, and it would have been much easier just to go look at the PowerPoint and look at the examples that are meant for these assignments. So, but it's if you do end up citing other people's codes, because eventually we'll be using some textbooks example scripts as well. Just make sure you're citing with like a comment where you got it, just to be sure. All right. Yeah. In my example, sample solution for assignment 2 is on campus as well if you want to take a look at that. Relative versus absolute, again, you guys actually this semester didn't have an issue with that as much, but this is the difference between these are two of the same links, except one's absolute and one's a relative link. So again, that's a thing. Folder naming, again, spaces, you end up with these weird %20 things. It gets messy. It's best just to make your index page has to be indexed in all lowercase with no spaces, but it's just good file or good format in general just to always do all lowercase and no spaces. All right, that's done. Moving on to some new stuff. So strings and escaping. So PHP strings. So strings are basically groups of characters, numbers, punctuations, or spaces. You've already used strings in your assignment too. Basically, they're chunks of text. So like this example, this is a simple string. That sentence, this is a simple string with these words and these spaces, is a string. You have, I don't know, it's kind of, it can't get any more high level than that. It's basically a chunk of text that can have a space, well, characters, numbers, punctuation, or spaces in it. So we've already used the echo statement in our assignment 2, and I basically said to just use double quotation marks for it and not to worry about why you're using double quotation marks. Well, here we're going to explain the difference between using double quotation marks and single quotation marks. So strings can be put inside either. They can be put inside either double quotation marks or single quotation marks. Like for the example here, both these two statements, so echo my name is Sam with double and echo my name is Sam with single, will output to this, will have the same output. You guys kind of saw that with your assignment too. Echo just basically just prints something onto the page. They can be single and double quotation marks as far as strings are concerned, can basically be used interchangeably, with a few exceptions. But for the most part, they're generally the same for what you know up to this point. Where they differ is how they interact with variables. So the kind of technical definition of both is that single quotation marks are taken literally and double quotation marks are interpreted. So what this means is single quotation marks, everything that is inside them is passed through as is. No matter literally what you typed in between those single quotation marks, that is what it's going to consider the string. So in this example down here, if I say my gallon of milk was $milk price, the string is literally going to be my gallon of milk was $milk price. Whereas double quotation marks will translate any variables that you have inside them. It's smart enough to interpret that while yes, this is a string, I think there's something different about this specific part. So like in this example, my gallon of milk was $milk price. Also, hold on. I don't like this example because I think it adds an extra thing that it doesn't need. Ignore this $, ignore this $. Pretend those weren't there. Because that way they're the same string for both, or else it's, whatever. Regardless. So in this scenario, my gallon of milk was $milk price. But because it's in double quotation marks, it's going to be smart enough to be like, hey, I have a variable called $milk price. So I'm going to turn this $milk price into whatever the value of that variable was. In this case, $57.99. So again, so these two are the exact same statement, except one was in double quotation marks and one was in single quotation marks. And if we look at the output, one of them says my gallon of milk was $57.99 because it interpreted that variable value. And the other one just takes it literally. Whatever you put inside those single quotation marks, that's what it spits back out at you. Are there any questions on the difference between single and double quotations? All got it? Pretty straightforward. All right, I trust you. All right, so a common question, before I just it's literally on the next slide, but if you haven't looked at the next slide, can anyone take a guess as to what might be an issue if, say, no, I'm not going to try and do the whole rhetorical, try and get you to guess the content. So a common question at this point is, well, how would I put quotation marks in my string? Like, let's say I wanted to have a quote that says, like, Bob Smith says, how are you today? And have it inside quotation marks actually printed onto the screen. Because if we just look at as is, we look at this example where you just say, well, I'll just put it in quotation marks. So Jim says, and then quotation marks, how are you today? And I'll just make sure I close it at the end. As you can probably guess, because the sample file is called bad PHP1, it's not going to work. So here, if I pull up, and again, if you're following along, we're looking at bad PHP 1. So again, this is the code that we have here. This, in theory, looks like it should work. I mean, I've got an echo statement that has an opening and closing quotation marks, and this is what I want it to spit out on the page. I want it to spit out, Jim says, quotation mark, how are you today? But as I've kind of alluded to, if we go run this, we get a nice big error message. What does it say? The error message says, syntax error, unexpected how, expecting a comma or semicolon around line 10. If we go look at the code, basically what happens is that PHP comes across this echo statement and says, all right, awesome, we have an echo statement, and I've got an opening quotation mark. Great, I'm gonna keep looking through the rest of all this text, and whatever's between this opening quotation mark and the closing quotation mark, that's my string. Awesome. So it goes along and it says, great, there's a space, it says Jim, there's another space, it says, there's a colon, there's a space, oh, and here, yep, this is the closing part of my string. That's the end of my string, and then it says, what is this? I don't know what to do with this, panic, shut down, error, break. Basically, even though we as humans understand that, hey, we're not saying the PHP command closing quotation marks, we just want that to be a regular quotation mark, PHP's dumb. It doesn't get that. All it knows is that it's expecting this to be like the end of the line, but instead of getting a nice clean semicolon, it's getting some other stuff that it does not know what to deal with. So, how do you put in a quotation mark like that, or any other special character that would normally cause PHP to break? You use something called the escape slash. Basically, it's in PHP, the escape slash is notated by a backslash. So that's the key right below the backspace on your keyboard if you've never used that before. And basically, if you put that in front of a special character, it'll tell PHP, hey, I know you normally do something fancy with this character, but don't. Just take it as a normal character of the English language. Just don't do anything fancy with it, just use it as a piece of text. So if we take this previous example, which broke, but we add escape slashes, one in front of each of the special characters that we want to just display normally, if we run that one, and again I can pull up the actual example, but you'll see it here, it'll actually echo out, Jim says, quotation marks, how are you today, end quotation marks. Another example down here, let's see. So again, this one has an echo statement that says, Jim asks Dustin, what is 5 plus 10, within quotation marks, and then it echoes out and concatenates in, nice little throwback to last week. But basically, again, because these are special characters inside an echo statement, we need to escape them in order for it to actually display them like this. Are there any questions? Does everyone understand the escape character? All right. And again, just to kind of give you a sneak peek as to the assignment, basically you're going to need to come up with your own example for most of these concepts. So again, this is a pretty, well, we got single and double quotes. If you understand them, great. You'll have to do an example of that in your assignment. Escape slash, you understand it? Great. You'll probably have to do an example like that in your assignment. So as we're going through and I'm asking, do you guys understand this? If you don't understand it, please tell me, because then I can explain it better. And that way when you do your assignment, you can do it. And that's great. Sorry, I'm sarcastic. You were warned. You were well warned. All right. So again, I'll ask again. No, this is a mercy call. If you changed your mind in the last 30 seconds, I won't hold it against you. Does everyone understand escape slashes? Awesome. All right. Head nods are good. I trust head nods more than just silent gazes. Awesome. All right. I prefer, yes, but all right. I'll accept head nods. Error messages. So some of you probably have already come across some error messages. Some of you will come across error messages going forward. Error messages are aptly named. They're messages that you get when you have an error. Specifically, more often than not, syntax error as opposed to logic errors. There's logic errors, which it's more of like my code isn't doing what I thought I told it to do, when in fact your code is doing exactly what you told it to do. You just didn't tell your code what to do properly. Versus a PHP syntax error message which says you typed something wrong, you forgot a semicolon, you forgot a quotation mark, you have an extra parenthesis, you messed something up in the syntax. So when PHP code fails to run, it'll most likely generate an error message. There will be details in that error message depending. Alright, so basically this bullet point is saying like the detail level in the error message will depend on your PHP server settings. The general reason for that is that in a production environment, like in a real grown-up website, you probably have error messages hidden or not displayed to the end user. Even if they somehow break, google.com, you're going to get a nice little clean cutesy error message that has like a little robot that says, oh no, it's broken, as opposed to saying there's an error on line 364 of google.php or whatever, because I don't want you to see that information. In a development setting, so like our web space, we have full error messages turned on, so you'll get as much detail as the computer can tell you, or the server can tell you. In general, most of the time, the error message will point out a troublesome line of your code. It'll normally say at the end, around where the issue is. And I say around because if you take it too seriously, you'll end up getting more confused. If we look back at the previous error message, so this one said the issue was on line 10. If we look at that, well, yeah, that's where the issue was, because it ran into an issue on this line. So that one, it worked out really well. But let's say, I'm going off script here. Let's see if this works. Let's say you had some spacing in your code or something like that. I'm curious if this will actually work. Let's see here. Oops. I've got an in-class folder for when I break the PowerPoint examples. So that way I don't accidentally break the real ones. Never mind. It caught me. Okay. I was hoping that it would still say line 10. Or, yeah, line 12. Is that where the issue is? Well, okay, so in this scenario, it says the issue's on line 12. That's where it broke, because we talked about earlier, it knows how to deal with all this stuff, it just freaks out when it gets to the word how. But technically, your issue is this character here on line 10. So that's where my kind of warning is that the line number of the error messages will be a good pointer to where the issue is, but it's not a guarantee of that's exactly where the issue is. So that's a good spot to start looking around. But look, if you still can't figure out what the issue is, look before it, look after it, and kind of, hunt a little bit. Let's see. The rest of the error, again, PHP tries to be helpful. So sometimes, like this was the example error that we got from that previous one, and it said unexpected how was expecting a comma or a semicolon. Well, that's a really weird way of saying it, but that is kind of what the issue was. It came across an unexpected how. It didn't know what to do with this, and that's because it broke right before it. It was expecting a semicolon like on this line up here. So again, debugging error messages is going to be kind of its own little skill you'll learn. In general, PHP tries to be helpful. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you get errors where you're just like, well, who in their right mind wrote that? That doesn't make any sense. Look at the line number and kind of debug from there. And then again, if you still are having real issues, the tutor, a second set of eyes is always helpful. So your classmates, the tutors, you can email me as well if you want me to take a look. Again, keep in mind my reply time, I do as best I can, but I do work a full-time job. Whereas the tutors have walk-in hours, and you can bug them as much as you want, because they get paid for that. I'm not trying to punt work off to them. It's more of if you want like a quicker response and you're on campus, you might as well go talk to them, because you can kind of go, talk to them back and forth. I will always answer you guys, but it might take me a little bit to when I'm checking my phone and I can send out responses. And especially if it's like, if I'm going to have to dive deep into your code, I probably can't sneakily do that at work. I'll probably have to wait until I'm off. But like, quick questions I try and answer when I can. But so there's my little disclaimer with that. Some of you may have noticed a file pop up on your web server called error log. Basically, this will automatically generate whenever you have a PHP error happen on your page. So if I go into, if I just refresh this, you'll notice it created this error log file because when I ran that bad PHP file, it ran an error. If you look at it, it's just basically a timestamp of the error message that you got. A couple things with the error file. You can delete it. Nothing will go wrong with it. It's not like a special file or anything. That being said, the next time you run that file and you get that error, it'll come right back. So, you know, you can, it doesn't do anything, it doesn't do any harm, it just kind of will just keep a collective record of the errors that you have until you delete it. So it's more of a, if you need to go back and reference an error, you can go look at it there, or if it's annoying you can delete it in the hopes that it won't come back, and it'll come back the next time you have an error. So. Common issues that will result in errors, so especially this early part of the semester, missing semicolons, missing quotation marks, too many quotation marks, mismatched quotation marks, so having a single quotation mark followed by a double quotation mark, missing an escape character, so that backslash, not having PHP code inside PHP tags. PHP code's pretty picky, so again, you'll have to kind of learn how to work through these error messages as you go through these assignments. But yeah, that's kind of what all you need to know about PHP at this point. Or PHP error messages. You need to know a lot more about PHP, but error messages, that's about what you need to know at this point. Any questions on PHP error messages? All understand in general what to do when you come across a PHP error? If it says that the problem's on line 9, the problem's always going to be exactly on line 9, right? No? Yay, people aren't sleeping yet. That's fine. Yeah. Alright, I'm just going to let that joke just die and move on. Constants and predefined variables. Alright, so first, quick refresher. This is a copy-paste slide from last week. Remember variables? So variables is where you have a $ variable name equals whatever value you want. You could have it be equal to a string, so something inside quotation marks, a number. Basically, it can be kind of any value you want, and you have it in the notation as $ whatever. PHP constants are similar to variables in that they store information, but unlike variables, they cannot be changed. For variables, I could say here $name equals Sam Goerke, echo it out, and then later say $name equals Bob Smith, and do it again, and it would change the value of that variable. The variables are, by definition, variable. Like, they are able to change. They are able to have a variable state. Whereas a constant is constant. Once a constant has been set and defined, you cannot change it. The value will not be able to be changed in that constant for as long as your PHP script is running. PHP constants are created using the define function. So the syntax of that is seen here. Basically, it's this line 9 is the magic. You have the word define. The space here is optional. We'll pull up this example. Actually, I'm just going to pull it up right away. Constant 1. Yeah, so it's this is the line right here that actually will declare the constant. So again, a variable would be something like, something like that, whereas this is setting a constant. So you say define. The space here is optional. It doesn't hurt anything. And then you give inside a set of single quotation marks. I don't know if it works with doubles. The standard syntax is to use singles. Feel free to try doubles if you'd like. You give it a constant name. So unlike variable names, which have a $ in front of them, constants don't have that. Which is why in the general kind of good formatting for constants, just so that way humans who are reading your code can tell that it's something different and special, is to make it all caps. Technically, you could have a constant like this, but that would just get really confusing because there's no way to know. It would blend in too well. So in general, we name constants in all caps. You give it a comma, and then you give it another string, and then you give it whatever you want that, you give it whatever value you want that constant to have. So this line right here will create a constant called name and set the constant name equal to Sam. Because then, just like with variables, I can echo it out and do some other stuff with it. So in this case, it says my name is, and then what does the period do? Does anyone remember from last week? Yes, concatenates. It basically allows me to put in something special, in this case, a constant. So I'm going to say my name is space, concatenate in the constant name, and then concatenate in a period. So if I go run this, that's pretty, self-explanatory. It says my name is Sam. Awesome. Let's see. I think I've got a little, so a little bit more breakdown of that syntax. Basically, the define function is the term in PHP that is used to declare constants. You give it a name, and you give it the data or value here. And it'll work the same even without a $ in front of it because it's not a variable, it's a constant. Alright, so this is an example. I don't like this example. I think it's complicated for no reason. The other thing to point out, the one thing that I do want to point out, is let's say I have, we've already saw the output of this. It pops up saying my name is Sam. Great. But let's say I change my name. Even though Sam is the best name there is, let's say I have a whatever, panic attack and I change my name. So I'm going to say, alright, yeah, I know I defined name as Sam, but really it should be Sam. Okay? I'm going to save this and upload this. What do you think is going to happen? What's going to be the output on that page?
Error.
Error? Okay, so we got one person saying error. Anyone else? First name. So what do you think it's going to pop up? Saying how many? The 1A or a lot of A's?
1A.
1A. So what do you think? Yeah, I should have made this. Let's make this Bob before I say, is it Sam or Sam? All right, so raise your hand if you think it's going to, and this one is not one of those polls where you can be like, I'm just not going to answer because I'm too cool for that. I want everyone to at least pick one of these answers. If you don't know, that's fine. That'll be one of the answers. All right, how many of you think that it's going to pop up saying, my name is Sam? Raise your hand. Okay. How many of you think it's going to pop up saying, my name is Bob? Okay. How many of you think it's going to give an error message? All right. And how many of you are honestly going to raise your hand proudly and say, I do not know, and I'm okay with that? Appreciate it. Appreciate it. That was literally about a split 25% for all 4 answers. That bodes well. Well, let's find out. So I'm going to go back to the, I think I have it in the in-class example. It says my name is Sam. So pats on the back for all those who came up with that, but no worries if you didn't. So let's look at the code real quick here. So, because constants are constant, not variable, you cannot change them. So once line 11 happened, once we said, hey, create a constant called Sam, we cannot change it. Even if I come along and say, hey, no, I want you to declare the constant name to Bob, PHP don't give a crap. It says, no, it's a constant. I'm not changing it. You already told me that name is equal to Sam, and I'm going to stick to it and never giving that up. Unlike a variable. If we were done a variable, you could have changed it and it would have been fine. But because it's a constant, it does not change. It won't error out. This line just won't do anything. And then it just will echo out just like it did before. My name is Sam. All right. Yes?
If you wrote the Bob line before the Sam line, would it change?
Let's try that. It's a good question. I do the revoting thing again, but I feel like I got a couple eye rolls with it last time, so I'll let it slide. If we refresh, it says Bob. Why is that? Because this line came first. In this case, we defined a constant called Bob. PHP said, great. It got to the next line, and it said, I don't care. Go away from me. Because you can't redefine a constant. Now, here's a question for you. Let's say I've got another line. We'll call this one. Now, what do we think is going to happen here? Is it still going to say Bob for both of these, or is it going to be able to understand that we want Bob for the first one and we want Sam for the second one? Yeah? In theory, no, I'm saying in theory because I just typed code on the fly, and then whenever I say something confidently, it never works how it's supposed to. In theory, you are correct. In theory, in this case, the second line does do something. It creates a new constant, a different constant called color, and names it Sam, apparently. Let's make that green. So if we save this and run, I'm going to re-upload. Yeah, so we get my name is Bob, my color is green. Because, if we go look at the code, this constant was declared first, this constant was declared second, and that's okay because they're different, and then we echoed out both of them. Are we all on the same page for constants? We understand how to declare them. how you can't change them, all that. Good. Couple caveats with that, because of course PHP, anytime you think you understand something, it's always well, there's a couple odd use cases where everything you know is completely wrong. Let's see, do I have a, oh, hey, nice little comparison slide. But a couple clarifications. When I say it will never change, it will, what I mean by that is it cannot change within the current code that is running. Just because I declare the constant name to Sam in, say, index.php, if I on a completely separate file, like, phpinfo.php, a completely separate page, and declare a constant name to something else, that's okay. It's only a constant within the current script that's running. It's basically, as much as when you run this code, it's a constant, but anytime you're in another file, you can, it's not like a super global thing that goes across files. It's just a constant within the current file that you're working with. Alright, so nice little comparison between variables and constants. So again, variables are fluid. They can be changed. They're not global. They can only be used where they're set. So if you're basically variables, so if you set a variable inside a script, you can only use that variable if you've set that variable. Constants can't be changed. They're global within the realm of that script. Variables are good for dynamic data, so things that change. So I would say probably 95% of this class between the two will be variables. You'll be using variables for mostly everything because they're more flexible. You can do a lot more stuff with them. It's a lot more easy you can change them, so you can kind of have things happen dynamically and logically. So you can have a variable that's like, I don't know, what's a good variable? Trying to think of, I'm blanking on a good example because the three that keep popping in my head are not good. So the ones that are popping in my head could very easily just be constants. Let's do with current page. So let's say you have a variable called $current page, and it basically is storing the current page, what page number the user's on, or something like that. Well, a constant would be really bad for that because, the moment I go to page 1, the constant's set and it can never be changed again. I go to page 2, oh, well, we don't know what to do with that. Whereas a variable, we could change that based off the logic of where is the user currently. Constants do have their uses though. So that last kind of 5% for this class, where they're good for is configuration or server settings and stuff for a security aspect that you want to force data to stay the same. So there are some session stuff and some more configuration parameters that once you do not want them changed. You want them set at the very beginning, like in a configuration file, and you do not want them changed. So that's where constants can come in handy with that. Any questions on constants? Constants versus variables? We all good with that? Head nods, good, good, thank you. All right. Predefined variables. So we talked about variables and we've talked about constants. So now we're going to talk about predefined variables. Predefined variables, again, pretty aptly named. They're variables that are predefined. They're already baked into PHP. The language already knows what the value of these variables are. PHP has a ton of predefined variables built into it. They allow you to, what does that say? Quickly glean? I don't even know what I was trying to say there. These allow you to quickly get? I don't even... Alright, that was a typo. I'm going to say get. I don't know where that happened. But these allow you to quickly get information that's frequently used. I'm going to blame this slide on Jim. This is an old enough link. I think he made this slide. So that's my defense on that. But basically, I stand by it. Basically, it's a way to allow you to get back certain bits of predefined information. We'll get an example of this in a second. The syntax of them is that they will always start with $_server in all capital letters. You don't need to, you just need to know that in general, if you see $_server, that means it's going to be one of these predefined variables that we're going to go over. This link normally has changed 50 times. Is it still there? Kind of. Hold on. PHP predefined variables. Bing. Oh my god. I refuse. No, I don't want those. I want, like, the list. The good old-fashioned, super long list. This is literally where I started, isn't it? They moved it! Ugh. I had this problem last semester, and I wrote a note to myself to go re-find it, and then I didn't. Alright, well, here's an example. So here are some examples of some predefined PHP variables. So again, you'll notice they all start with $_server. Then they have these square brackets, and then they have single quotation marks, followed by a variable name. So you can see they're kind of like the examples here are kind of more metadata-esque stuff that the PHP or like your server already knows. It's not like stuff about like logic that you're building in. It's more of stuff that the server already knows. So like it knows the IP address of where your user's from. It knows what web server you're running. It knows all these like the timestamp of when the request was sent. It can pull all these because these are predefined known things. So if we go back to the PowerPoint, these are some examples of some predefined variables. So we've got script file name, HTTP user agent, and server software. So what this script is doing, just to throw it out here, even though you can use these predefined scripts as regular variables, just to make things clean and easy, we're setting a local regular variable equal to that predefined variable, because then it's a little easier to echo them out. But basically, we're just echoing out the value of these three predefined variables. Script file name will basically pull up where you're currently running that file. HTTP user agent will basically pull back the user agent, or basically what browser you're running it from. And server software will pull back basically your web server information. So I'm going to go quickly look at predefined. So again, the code's the same, but we're just going to go run it. Yeah, so you'll notice it's a little the values are a little different than the one in the PowerPoint because I'm running it in a different spot. So this one, it's gonna this first one, $_server script file name, turns into this line right here, because that's where this file is currently being run. It's currently run in INFOST440, public HTML, week 3, PowerPoint examples, week 3, predefined.php. I didn't have to tell it that; it just knew that. And then same thing for the user agent and software version. I just like how in Jim or in the other. Oops, did I lose it again? This one was like super complicated and had this whole long list, and mine just says Apache. Both true, but probably different versions of PHP do different things, I would guess. So one thing to note with this, so again, just to make things cleaner, this example, we set local variables for all these before actually echoing them out, but there's no reason that you can't just echo out, let's see. You can still echo out them just like regular variables, they just kind of get big and messy. So you could still say like, the value is, because I don't, concatenate in, and this should still work. Well, actually, that's a good question. Will this still work when I run this? Trick question. I forgot a semicolon. So no, it wouldn't have. Now it might. Let's go see. Back to the in-class one. Yeah, so it still is able, it's not as pretty because I didn't format it, but even if I didn't change it to a local variable first, it still knows what the value is. You're still able just to echo it out like normal. This is just a lot more to deal with than just $server. So generally, if you're working with servers, predefined variables, it's pretty normal to create a local variable of it first because it just makes it a little easier. Again, there are a lot more than just these three. If we go to, oops, come on, nope. Click the link. There we go. Oh, this is the page I want. That's right. All right. So from the link in the PowerPoint, they now split it apart. So you have to click $_server to get the list of predefined server variables. It used to just be the link that I have linked, but there we go. So here we can see basically all of the predefined variables. There's a lot of them. They do a lot of cool stuff. I don't know. Does anyone, just someone shout one of them out as I'm scrolling through? Anyone? Anyone?
Except language.
Accept language is the one I heard. Awesome. So let's go see what that is. It says contents of the accept language header from the current request. All right. So in theory, that should tell. I should be able to tell what language my computer is. So we're gonna create another local variable called lang. We're gonna have that equal to that. Right? That'll work. No. There's syntax is a thing. So it has to start with $_server. I need to put it inside these square brackets. And I need a semicolon at the end, right? Oops. Semicolon at the end. All right, am I good?
No.
No, the color coding should have given it away. I need to put it inside quotation marks. Boop, boop, like that. All right, so now, so I'm gonna delete that one out. Let's just copy and paste this so I can steal the pretty formatting. The language, I'm just gonna say the lang is lang. Alright, let's try this. Predefined? Yeah. Alright, so that predefined variable is equal to EN for English US, English, and Q equals 0.9. I don't know what that means. I'm sure if you research it, you can figure it out. I do know that this is the standard for US English, but... so again, for part of the assignment, you're going to need to do an example using predefined variables. It would be I think it would be kind of fun to cool and go look through the link and like find one that's cool that you see here. You are allowed to use the ones we did here. Just make sure you're not doing exactly the same, and you need to, if you're going to base your homework assignments off the examples, change them up somewhat. Don't just copy and paste. You're not learning. Don't do that. You want to learn in this class, so make sure you're actually understanding what's happening. So what I'd recommend for the part of the assignment where it's to give an example of predefined variables, to actually pull up the list and be like, all right, remote port sounds cool, or script file name, and try some of them. Any questions on predefined variables? All right, everyone understand predefined variables? How to call them? How to identify them? How do you know something in your code is a predefined variable? What's like the thing they all have in common?
Server.
$server. I think I heard it from a couple of y'all. Yeah, so they all have that $_server prefix. All right, I'm trusting y'all, and we'll go on. Numbers and math, or math and numbers. So PHP can do math and numbers. Pretty self-explanatory. Let's see, do I have a... Yeah, basically the syntax is pretty straightforward. The plus sign is addition, minus minus, multiplying is the asterisk, division. We'll come back to modulus, increment, and decrement. We'll just focus on these first four for right now. So like here's an example where basically you could say math is equal to 1.01 plus 1.07 times 43.72 divided by blah, 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 and echo that out, and you'll get a nice big answer at the end there. Normally at this point, there's a couple people who have had maybe a little bit more math history have a question popping up in their head. Does anyone have that question popping up in their head? No? No one? All right. So I'll just, again, a question that has popped up is, what order will it run these things in? Like, will it follow order of operations, or will it just go from left to right? Good question. Most of the time, it'll follow order of operations, but I wouldn't trust it. What I would do to be on the safe side, if you're actually doing like a complex math thing with your PHP stuff, which don't worry, you don't have to do it this class. Put stuff in parentheses. Again, remember in PEMDAS, you always start with parentheses. That works in PHP as well. So if I were to put parentheses around this first part and this part, it would first add those together before continuing on down the line. So again, if you run into that issue, you can use parentheses to like solidify the order you want math to happen. More often than not, though, it's pretty rare for you to be doing something like this in one line. It'll be more of like you have a couple different variables and you're adding them and then you're doing stuff with them. So like, I don't know, if you're making, or I don't know, when you're using math for. I'll just tell you an example that we use PHP math later in the semester. Is that when we make for your final project, which is gonna be like a blog site with a bunch of like blog posts, we add pages to that, so like it'll only show like 5 records per page, and then we'll have different page numbers. We use a little bit of math to basically calculate out how many pages we need to have. So we do that within PHP to make sure we have the right number of buttons at the bottom. Any questions on just this kind of basic level math where it's just, again, pretty straightforward? This is, elementary level stuff, plus, multiply, divide, minus. We all good on that? All right. So now the couple of weird ones. Modulus, increment, and decrement. Do I have slides on these? Oh, hey. Yeah, so again, for the first 4, these are just basic examples of the kind of basic operations. You can say 5 plus 5 and echo it out, and it'll say is 10. 10 minus 5, etc., etc. All right, modulus. Has anyone from experience with other coding languages, or I don't know if it's actually a term in actual math, but does anyone actually know what modulus is from previous experience? What you got?
So you take the first number, divide by the second number you give it.
Yep.
And then whatever the remainder is without a decimal, that's what the result is.
Perfect. So yeah, so for, basically, it's when you do division and there's a remainder, it's whatever the value of that remainder is. So in this example, if we're saying 123 modulus 20, what that'll do is, and I swear this is as most math as this class gets. So 123, oops, what was it, 20? I'll just trust you guys. So we divide by 20, and that equals 6.15. So then the modulus of that, where's my, 3. Oh, it's the remainder. Thank you. I'll read from our example there. So basically, if we go through and say, okay, so it's 6.15. So that means 20 went into 123 6 times, and then there was 3 remainder, 123 minus 20. So that's what modulus is. So you might be thinking, what the hell would I ever use modulus for? It's a good question. There's some cool tricks that you can do with it. A pretty common one is you can use modulus to figure out if a number is even or not. That's probably its most kind of stereotypical, first example about modulus, is that, if you give a number and you try and do modulus of it, well, 2 will go into it evenly with no remainder. So the modulus of a number modulus 2, if it's an even number, will always equal 0, and if it's not, it's an odd number. So again, there's some kind of cool stuff you can do with that logic if you needed to figure out, I don't know, if something was even or odd in your thing. Again, not really important, but it's there. You can use it. It's a cool tool to have. Increment and decrement. So these basically, well, they increment and they decrement. No, that's not helpful. Basically, increment will increase a value by default by 1. So the syntax, if we go back to here, increment was plus plus. So unlike saying, I could just say 5 plus 1, and that would equal 6, or I can say, hey, I've got a variable called 5, and hey, I want you to increment it. I want you to take that variable and plus plus, increment it, and what that'll do is it'll automatically, oops, hey, why does that say 5? Sorry, plot twist, because 5 plus 1 is not 5. No, not map 1. Oh, okay, so apparently my screenshots are on. I blame that one on Jim, but I kind of remember making that one. Screw it. Jim did it. Oh, actually, he did. Look, it says shell 253. Regardless. That's really funny. I think I've had these slides for like a couple years now. Has no one caught that 5 plus 1 equals 6? No? Whatever. Sorry about that. Regardless, so the increment, if I say a variable called inc is equal to 5, and I increment it, that variable is now equal to 6. I didn't have to tell it plus 1 or something to that effect. It just becomes incremented, so it adds 1 to it. This is nice for this is nice for, let's say you need to do like a step counter or something that you want, just like whenever something happens it increases a variable by 1, rather than saying like, all right, so we take the previous variable, we say, okay, this new variable is equal to the previous variable plus 1, and then we get rid of the old variable. It's messy. You can just increment it by using the plus plus. So you can just say that variable plus plus, and that variable now is that whatever that variable was plus 1. Decrement, same thing in reverse. It basically decrements by 1, so it goes down by 1. You can change it if you yeah, that's all we need for that one at this point. Any questions on PHP math and numbers? Yes.
So we can still have a variable plus plus itself. So like in line 37, instead of having inc1 equal to inc plus plus, we could have inc equal inc plus plus.
That is a great question. Let's take a look here. I'm just going to get rid of these top examples just to clear it up real quick. So the question is basically, why is... It's different than the PowerPoint. Why did I change this? Still blaming it on Jim. So the question is basically, without setting it to a new variable, if I do something like that. So like if you've got a variable called inc, set it to 5, and then you just say, hey, increment inc by, just increment it by using the plus plus, what will this value be? Is that kind of what you're asking?
You would say inc equals inc plus plus.
Yeah, well, okay. So we'll try this one first, and then we'll try just inc equals inc plus plus. We'll try that as well. Here, I'll do that for the decrement. So like that?
Yeah.
Okay. So in theory, if it's working, this one should equal 6, and this one should equal 9 if it's working. So, plot twist, that one worked. This one did not. So let's take a look as to why that happened. So this first one, because increment stands alone, you don't actually have to set like another variable to it. This in and of itself, because I gave it a variable name and said plus plus, it just automatically incremented that variable by 1. It's just a standalone, you don't need to do anything else with it, it just automatically added 1 to it. So now this, let's try and figure out the logic of why this still equals 10. We create a variable called, because I don't actually know offhand, let's see, we create a variable called 10. We then reset the variable to the variable decremented. My logic is that this would be equivalent to 9, which then would set this variable to 9, because if we echo out, yeah, that's even weirder. That's because that did 10 first. So what?
Does having the minus minus before the dollar sign decrement make a difference?
I wonder if I'm literally doing the exact same thing I had the problem last year. Let's find out. I don't think so. It always is. You'll see how often we actually use decrement in these like assignments and stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
I think I know why.
All right, please tell me.
Because if you go back to the code,
Yeah.
You know, I don't think is it like all together because it'll say like actually I'm wrong. Never mind.
All right. Well, you're on the same level I am.
There's a Java has the same.
I'm wondering if there was like a PHP shift, like a version change or something. Regardless, I'm going to research that. I will get back to you. For the purposes of this assignment, you can just use increment. That seems to work. Or apparently, if you put it before, that works too. Or if you do where it's a little bit less clean, but like where it has the extra step, like in the examples where it like goes through and sets another variable. Regardless, they all do what it. Oh, you got some?
Okay, I think I do.
Okay.
Hopefully, I'm right this time. Okay, so I'm wondering it's because you know how you say echo dash dash deck, and
Yep.
then you got another echo. I wonder if you got the right answer, but they're just together because you don't have a break.
Yeah. So let's add an align break to make it a little cleaner. I still think it's backwards from what I would assume it should be.
I think I'm still.
Well, I mean, you're right though. That's part of the issue of why it's not clean.
Okay.
So it's 9 and 9. Okay, so the first one is because we did it that way, but then so does decrement apparently have to be before it? I wonder if there was like a PHP version change because they like some of these say because increment worked with it behind, but I wonder if again I will research that. We've got enough going on where it works. You don't use decrement that often, so don't worry about it. I'm pretty sure the assignment just says to like show some math examples. You don't if you want to try and do something with increment and decrement, by all means. If you want to just keep to the addition and subtraction, that's fine too. I wonder if like the syntax change where you're supposed to have it before or not. That feels to me like the gut instinct. And then, of course, PHP, being the weird language that it is, only made that a requirement for decrement, not increment, which is why the increment one still worked and decrement didn't. I'll look into it. All right, so minus that abyss that we just went down, are there any questions in general about PHP math and numbers? Yes?
So that actually applies to both increment and
It
decrement.
does.
It's called pre-increment and post-increment.
Okay.
So when you have the operators before it, it returns it first, then increments it, and tops it. It's done right.
You are correct. Well outside the scope of this class. Don't worry about it, but yes, you are right. I remember reading that because I'm pretty sure. Yes, if you want to shoot that link, like throw it on like the class discussion board, like at the top, that would be awesome. Again, I know maybe someone will read it, but if you want, that'd be cool. So up here in like the general class discussion, if you throw it in, that'd be awesome. So there, you can learn the difference between post and pre and post decrement and increment. Surprisingly, that will not be on the midterm. No laugh. All right, apparently that was a dud. Question. So I got a question for you guys. So it's 6:30, so it's been an hour. So I'll give you guys a choice. We've got, we got 3 more seconds left. Let's take. You guys tell me. Would you rather take? Because we're not going to take the full 3 hours. We're going to have like a good amount of work time. I'd say we probably still have like, I don't know. Depends on how many rabbit holes we go down. Would you guys prefer to take a break now, or like just push your way through? Maybe be like another hour. Again, normally they always say like after an hour and a half, but again, most of the time we're almost done by that point. So that's why I kind of thought I'd check that in at an hour. Should we just maybe take like a 10-minute break? That'd be no? Yes? Raise your hand if you want a break now. Sorry, man. I think you guys got outvoted this time. We'll touch base in a half hour, and we'll see where we go from there. Again, this class is always a little funky. Again, I'm not trying to like steal your breaks, but like if you have like a legit 3-hour class, then yes, the break halfway through is definitely needed. We rarely go that long. Some of the later classes, I think the longest is like a little over 2 hours, and that's a long one. Don't get me wrong, but like these basically take like an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes type of thing. So then I always feel like, you can make it through. But let me know if you guys just tell me you want a break, we'll have a break. PHP functions. PHP has multiple built. Blah blah. PHP has numerous built-in functions. So like things like, we'll get into example in a second. The general syntax of a function is you have something. So in this case, blah blah. You have some name of a function followed by parentheses. It allows you to basically program complex tasks more easily. Quick question: in your Python class, did you guys deal with functions?
Yes.
Awesome. It's very awesome. This used to be the first programming class in the curriculum, so then I had to like explain the fundamentals of what a function is. Now I can kind of just talk about functions in regards to PHP. So yeah, so they basically allow you to program complex tasks and like call that function to do whatever that repetitive task is. there are two types. There are built-in or predefined functions, and then there are user-defined functions. So we've already used one, so that PHP info function, which remember was literally just PHP info parentheses parentheses, that's an example of a function. Can anyone take a guess as to which of the two, was it a built-in predefined function or a user-defined function? Built-in, because you didn't make this. PHP did. And if you did, you really shouldn't be in this class. And also, you'd be a lot older, because I know but regardless. Can I change that link on me too? No, let's see. The online manual for PHP will have a bunch of information about all the predefined functions. So if you want to go look up more kind of information on that, you can. I think this is more just to point out, just to link the PHP manual. Quick side note, again, PHP and all of its oddities, I think PHP has got to be the only programming language I've ever seen where the official manual has comments on it that are more clear than the actual manual. These are part of the official manual because the manual itself is not that good. It's gotten better over the years, but so normally if you're going to the PHP manual looking for something, normally the answer you actually want is somewhere in the comments in the manual, which kind of cracks me up. Alright, so we're going to first talk about built-in or predefined functions. So there's a whole bunch of them. So if we pull up, normally we can get a list. No, not Bing again. Yeah, there's a lot of them. Without just literally, there's thousands of built-in functions for all sorts of things that PHP can do kind of built-in and natively. One example of those is something called the string length function. It's pretty straightforward. It'll tell you the length of a given string. So in the example here, we've got a variable called count equal to the function string length, or string, because apparently a couple extra letters was just too much work. The opening and closing parentheses, and then inside we give it a string, because this function basically requires a parameter. It requires a string in order to tell you how long that string is. If we run this, then we end up saying the phrase I love to count contains 16 characters, because this function will run and it'll count the number of it'll count the length of that string as 16 characters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces count in this regard. Let's see here. That's just one example of a PHP function. There are, again, I just showed you, there are thousands more. Generally, no one is going to probably be like, oh, I'm going to go learn a new PHP function. Let me pull up this massive list and click on one and learn something. Generally, what is more likely to happen is you have an idea for a web app that you're trying to build, and you're like, how do I do X? All right, I'm going to Google PHP how to do X, and someone on Stack Overflow will be like, oh, you should use the X function. And then you can go Google that function and go learn about it and how to use it. That's more likely of how you'll end up learning and kind of seeing new functions. But Google and the internet is your best friend for looking at those. You can look at the PHP manual. You can kind of you can just see, if you Google cool PHP functions, whatever you want. There's tons of them. You can find whatever you want. Trial and error. We'll be using lots of functions in this class. I say this because as part of this assignment, you're going to have to show a couple examples of a predefined function. Again, you're welcome to use something like the string length function, because we've got that one here. Or go find another one. Again, go practice trying to find other information that you can use that is helpful. Let's see. Any questions on predefined built-in PHP functions? All right, we good? Everyone understand? Got less head nods than before. It's fine. It's okay. You had your chance for your break. Only 2 people chose it. They're still grumpy at all of you. I'm kidding. Next type of functions, user-defined functions. So, again, as the name, you'll notice a lot of things in PHP, despite being as messy as they are, their names make pretty straightforward sense. User-defined functions are functions that were defined by, you guessed it, the user. This allows you to build your own functions. This is probably similar to what you guys did in your Python class. Basically, you have a block of code, a block of statements that can be used repeatedly. So a good example is the W3 school page for functions. They have a nice little breakdown, and it's just a good write-up. So I'd recommend you take a look at that. But in so this example, we've got a function. And the So the syntax to declare your own function is you say function. That's just the built-in PHP special word that it knows. You then give it a name. You name whatever your function, you give it whatever you want it to be called. In this case, we called it family name. You then you tell it if you want any parameters for your function to work. So do you need any information in order for your function to work? In this case, we're saying yes. I want when a user calls the family name function, they need to give me an F name, a first name. Then, if this function is executed, I want it to echo out that variable first name, followed by space, followed by Schultz, and then a line break. So, if we look here, and then again, to call that function, we just say family name, parentheses, parentheses, and then we give it whatever parameter we want, in this case, a first name. So here, these 5 lines here turn into these lines here, because each one of these is running this function, and running this echo statement. Now again, in this example, it probably was more work to do it with functions than it would have been just to echo out these names. But as you can imagine, the idea is that if you've got a much more complicated function going on, something that you do multiple times, it would be nice to be able to save time, just write the code once, and then just call that function in the future. An example of that is you could have a function called isAdministrator. And so basically it's a function that it tells PHP, hey, is the current user an administrator? So then whenever you want to have like a page or a dashboard, something that only an administrator can see, rather than doing your full logic check every single time, you can just have the function, hey, if isAdministrator is true, do the following. If not, don't do it. Another example of that, so this is an addition or a sum function. So the idea is that you've got a function called sum. We asked for 2 parameters this time, so we asked for a variable x and a variable y. And then basically the function, when it runs, will create a new variable called z and make it equal to what x plus y equals. And then it'll return that value. So this is important to point out the difference between these 2 examples. So this one had the function echoing out something, whereas this one had it returning something. So the difference between those is, so there's nothing stopping you from just having your function echo out something, like this one did. We know that the end result is we want this function to be able to print something onto the screen. Great. But sometimes you have functions where the output isn't necessarily printing something onto the screen. Like, let's say the example I kind of talked about, isAdministrator. You're not going to be printing out onto the screen whether or not they're an administrator or not. It's more of a logic thing. It returns true or false, or in this case, it returns value z, which then you can do other stuff with. Now, given in this example, we also echo it out, but you'll notice with this one, we didn't have an echo statement down here at all because the echo statement was inside the function. Whereas this one, we need to have the echo statement because the function only returns the value. It doesn't print it to the screen, it doesn't echo it, it just returns it internally to PHP. So we need to echo it out with something like this. Echo 5 plus 10 equals, then the function, and because that's inside an echo statement, it's able to pull that value. If I just have this sum 5, 10 elsewhere, not inside the echo statement, it won't do anything because it'll return the value internally, but you didn't tell it to do anything. You didn't tell it to print it to the screen. You didn't tell it to echo to the screen. So again, just a little difference between here where you return the variables, the output to the function, whereas this one, we tell it to echo out directly every time. Again, that's a little bit more diving into it. You don't need to worry about that as much. You're welcome to try and use built-in defined functions for some of your assignments. Probably, unless some of the later assignments, it might make your things more clean. So by all means, are good to know, and you need to know them for this assignment. Yes, what you got?
So what happens if you use just different numbers for sum or is it gonna print an error, or would it just give you whatever number?
So what do you mean different numbers?
Like if you don't put the proper numbers that you get from that you have inside of backup,
So let's take a look here.
so it does it matter? Or?
What's this one called? Functions 2. So like, so what am I changing? So tell me what to change for your example. What were you saying?
I'm just saying, like, if you change the digits that are inside sum, is that where it's just adding those two numbers together?
Yep. So what it's
So
doing? Oh,
If
go on.
you, sorry. So if you just add random numbers, it's still going to give that as the answer, while 5 plus 10 is just the string then.
So yeah. So basically, if I change it to like this, yeah. So you're right. So these the little prefix to it where it just says 5 plus 10 equals. That's just a happy string. This
okay.
could just say hippo. Whereas the function is the only thing that's dynamically
okay.
changing. If I go, because I kind of want to see hippo. Oh, side note, have I given my hippo speech yet? No? Okay. Quick side note about the hippo speech. If I ever refer to hippo in any way, shape, or form, that's my way of saying that it can be literally anything you want. I ran into this issue where like we'd run into things like this one, where people would think that or they would think that you could only make a function if you put the word sum here. They didn't realize that that was something that you can name whatever you want. So I've made it a habit where if it's something that you can name whatever you want, I'll try and use hippo a lot. So again, so if you see, I refer to hippos a lot in this class. Just just lean into it. It happens. But just know that's kind of my way of saying it can be whatever you want. It can be hippo. So let's go see a hippo. Yeah, so in this case, 5 plus 10 equals, now that's just kind of funny that actually kind of looks similar. That's coincidental. Save. Much better. Yeah, so this first part where it says 5 plus 10 is just because that's what we have in this string here to make it pretty. But just like how in this one we just said hippo, that's what it ended up here as well. So this is where it's actually doing the math. This was just the pretty text we put before it. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Any questions on, so that was a little denser of a part. Any questions on built-in functions in PHP? User-defined functions? You all know how to make your own function? You all know how to call your own function? You know how to go call a PHP built-in function? These are all things you're going to have to prove to me you know in your assignment, so are you sure you all understand and know that? Cool. All right. Conditions and switches. All right, so we kind of alluded to this last week of how basically we can use logic in PHP. Important kind of just terminology to talk about. We've got true, false. Those are, well, pretty self-explanatory. We've got null. This really shouldn't say mean 0. I blame Jim. It means it does not exist. It technically does not mean 0. It is a non-existent value. It's not, if you say 1 minus 1, that means 0, or that would equal 0, but that 0 is still a value. Whereas null is if it just doesn't exist. So it'd be like the example of, so like, if I had something like this. Currently, the variable hippo is equal to 5. Now, the variable hippo is equal to null. It's not equal to 0. It's not equal to it does not exist. It is null. It has not been set. It just, when I say echo out hippo, it does not exist. It is null. And the last one is set. Basically allows you to just check whether or not a variable has been set with anything. So you're not checking the actual value. You're just saying, hey, has the variable hippo been set with anything at all? The general kind of condition clauses for PHP are if, else, and case. And they work by using the curly brackets. So again, this is a copy-paste from last week, just some operators, friendly reminders, because this is how we kind of pull logic into our code. And so combining these guys with these guys, we end up with something like this. you end up with the syntax up here being if, set of parentheses, and inside that parentheses you have a condition. So you have something like if a variable is equal to 15. Then you have open and closing curly brackets, and then you have the code that you want to execute if that condition is true. And again, I know you guys dealt with conditions in Python, right? All right. So again, this is how you do it in PHP. So in this case, we're saying if the variable total is equal to 15, and again, I could have used any of these operators here. If that is true, echo out variable 1 plus variable 2 does equal 15. A little bit more complex, a little bit more longhand version. Do I have a... stand by. Ignore that. I always feel like there should be one more example here. All right. So the longhand form is that you can pair an if statement. So this is a basic if. If this, do this. But you can make it a little bit more complex. You can say, you can pair if with a bunch of else ifs, which will basically say, hey, check to see if this thing is true. Condition 1 is true. If it is, great, do this. Else if, hey, that first condition wasn't true, but can you check condition 2 instead? If it's true, great. If it's not, go down to the next one. Else if condition 3, it's true, great. Echo it or do whatever this code is. If it's not, great. And in this case, we don't end with an else if, we end with an else, which basically says, hey, if all of the previous conditions fail, if all else fails, do this bottom. It's the else statement. It's basically it runs if none of the above conditions were true. So you can basically kind of have a series of events with your logic. So you can say, hey, does x equal 5? No? Okay, else if does x equal 6? No? Else if does x equal hippo? Else, and then no, else, and then you don't even have to give a condition with the else statement. You just tell it what to do in case none of these go true. For this class, you probably won't be doing too many else ifs. You'll probably be doing the more basic form, which is just a basic if else. You say if condition 1 is true, or so if condition 1, execute the following code. Else, so if it's not true, do the following. There's nothing wrong with doing the else if chain with it, but probably it's a little bit more straightforward. So I think a lot of students, when they're doing their code, will end up just doing just a combination of doing if else's. So again, this is totally fine as well. It'll check the condition 1, execute if it's true, and if not, executes the else statement. Any questions on if else statements and logic and conditions? Awesome. We good? Cool. Case statements are also known as switch statements. They are an alternate way of writing an if, else if, else if, else if, else statement. So this first one here, a case switch statement is an alternate way of doing something similar. Basically, these two bits of code are equivalent. So this first one we say, hey, if I is equal to 0, echo out I equals 0, else if, check to see if it equals 1, else if, check to see if it equals 2, and in this case we don't have a final else, but so that we're saying check if it's 0, check if it's 1, check if it's 2. A switch statement basically says, hey, we're going to be looking at one variable. Switch that one variable, which it's not a verb switch, we're not saying switch this variable, it's just the term saying we're going to be analyzing this variable. So we're saying variable I, same one we're looking over here, and we're going to give it a couple cases. We're going to say, hey, can you check to see if the case is that I is equal to 0, do the following. If it's 1, do the following. If it's 2, do the following. And then you end each execution line by using a break line. So you just say break semicolon at the end of it. So this is good for a couple different things. So you'll notice it's a little bit more, it has more to it. It's a little bit more messy than just a basic if-else statement. But it has a couple good use cases. If you have something where it's like this, where you're just checking to see if one variable is equal to a certain number, it's faster and takes less processing power to do a switch statement. Because you can just say, hey, do the case 0, 1, 2, 3, and all the way down. Whereas this has a little bit more flexibility where these three conditions could be totally unrelated to each other. You could check to see if variable I is equal to 0, and then check to see if variable hippo is red. They don't actually have to be with each other, whereas a switch statement you're only checking one variable. You're saying, hey, this is the variable we're checking. These are the different cases, the use cases we're going to check and look at. Yeah, so for the most part, if-else statements or case statements can, if-else statements will work well for simple scripts. For most of the assignments in this class, you'll probably be using if-else statements. You need to, I would focus when you're going through and like learning these and practicing for the assignments, an understanding of if-else statements is more important than case statements. Only move on to case statements once you kind of understand and know how an if-else statement works. And again, y'all took Python. I built this slide back before. There was programming class before this. So you guys should probably be able to breeze through that a little bit, that transition a little bit more quickly, but it's still good advice. All right. I think this is the last section we got, right? Woot. HTML forms with PHP. So, I'm not going to talk about this slide. We're going to save that for next week. It's there. Feel free to read it because I just made it sound like it was some secret, but it's not applicable here. Basically, the general gist that you need to know is that if you have a form in a PHP page, you can keep that information. We'll learn that we literally spend the next 2 weeks just on forms. The general process of a PHP HTML form is that you have a form, like a good old-fashioned HTML form, and then that page is then processed. It's processed by PHP and allows you to do some dynamic stuff. So like in this case, we ask for name, email, gender, age, and a comment, and then we can have PHP actually echo that information back to the user. Thank you, Jim Schultz, for the following comment. I would like to submit my information. So that's kind of, again, that's a very easy example, but it is showing something really powerful. It is showing you how you can take user input, input from a form, and process it with PHP and do some dynamic cool stuff with it. Yes, this one's pretty boring. It's just spitting the information back at the user. But you use the exact same process that we'll be learning to take information from a user and store it in a database, send an email, basically any user interaction on a website. Think of how many forms you fill out on a website. A login form, a register form, fill out a Facebook comment form, post a tweet. Literally all of those are web forms that are then dynamically processing that information. So there's my kind of we're doing something cool. I swear, starting next week. This week, we're just going to dip our toe just barely in it. What the assignment asks for this week is actually all review, 95% review from your previous HTML classes, just to remind you of some basic skills that you probably forgot, specifically so then next week, when we shift gears away from HTML into the PHP side, those will be fresh in your mind. So, let's see here. We're going to come back to the slide. Ignore that top part. So this middle part, this is an example HTML form. This shouldn't be too new to you. Again, you learned about this in your 240 class, and we kind of reviewed it last week as well. You've got opening and closing form tags, and then a bunch of input fields. So we've got a text field here, a radio button, a drop-down menu, and a submit button. Okay? All that is pretty straightforward. In theory, if I get rid of these guys just for a second, Like if you were to look at this code, in theory, this is all stuff you learned in 240, with one exception. Can anyone point out the one exception of what you don't actually know from what you know from 240? What you got?
Isn't the action portion with the handle form.php?
Is that what you were thinking as well?
Yeah.
Awesome. I mean, it did help that it was, highlighted. But yes, you are exactly correct. This guy up here. When you guys did in 240, you probably just had an open form tag. So it literally would have ended here. It would have just kind of been like this guy here, but without the slash. We're adding on a little bit to that. So let's talk about that. So it's generally referred to as the form action because it's an action tag inside the form tag. So it's called the form action because it says form action. Yeah. That wasn't funny at all. Regardless, I judge myself just as much. Basically, two parts of this. The action part basically tells the web server where to send the data from your form. It says, hey, I've got a form here. Where do you want it to go when you hit the submit button? Where do you want me to send this information to? You can give it either a URL, so like in this case, http://google.com, or you can give it another PHP script. You can say, hey, send this code from this form to a PHP script. You can send it to either. You just need to tell it some location, and it'll send that information to it. For this to work, for your form action to actually execute when they hit the submit button, shocker, you need a submit button. You'd be surprised. Again, if you need, you can Google HTML form submit button if you need a refresher, or look here. Input type submit. It's its own special submit. It's its own special input type, and it basically gives you a nice button that when you click it, will submit that form. Make sure that you have an input type equals submit inside your opening and closing form tag, or else it won't actually do anything with your form action. So again, the form action will send the information to wherever you have in the specified in this action option. Ignore method equals post for a second. Let's pull up this example. So in this example, I've got basically that same form that was on the previous page, or I've got a form, and then I've got form action equals http://google.com. So what this is going to do then, if I go pull this form up, blah 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 blah. When I submit this, it's going to do a couple things. So the first thing it's going to do is it's going to send all the information I entered into that form. It's going to send it to google.com. So fun fact, Google does not like this because that's not a cool thing. So Google gives me a sad robot and says that post was inappropriate. Basically, because you don't want random information thrown to your website, Google does not want my junk data, so it gives me a nice error message. But that does not change the fact that I did send my data to Google. Google had to take my data, and yes, they immediately threw it away and told me off, but they still got it. And that's because in my form action, I said, hey, send my form data to google.com. I say that, so again, for part of this week's assignment, you're going to have something in your form action. What I'd recommend is like just pick a random website to send your little test form to, just to kind of see if they have like a fun reaction to it. Like I'm pretty sure UWM also. Some websites will just do nothing. Some websites will like crash. Some websites will, yeah, it's a whole bunch of stuff. But basically, as part of this week's assignment is you've got to do one of these kind of sample forms with a form action. Feel free to pick a cool website, and it'll make us laugh when you send the information to them. Let's go see what happens if I do UWM. Oops. Oh, I didn't do. So in this case, because I didn't give it the http :// it assumed that this was a name of a file nearby. Let's go back, refresh, just to get a fresh form. And it just dumps me to the home page. I can assure you, it still throws away my information. They just decided not to tell me it was inappropriate. Regardless, so that's what the form action does. It tells your form where to send the information. The method equals post. We're going to explain what that is next week. I'm just going to say for this week, just put it in. Just basically kind of how it is here, where you say, you've got, the form, your form action that we just learned about, and then it just says method equals post. Just put that in there. Don't worry about it. We'll learn about that next week. If you forget about it, it's not going to break anything. It'll still work. That's fine. You won't lose points, but just throw it in there and it'll be fine. We'll go over it next week. All right. Well, we will be spending the next couple weeks and basically the rest of the semester dealing with forms. Because again, that is such a powerful way. That is almost every cool thing on the internet basically starts by taking information from the user. So how do you do that? You use forms in one way or another. So that's why it's really cool. We're going to be doing lots of stuff, and we'll be dealing with that next week. We'll also be learning about arrays, looping, forms, and some more advanced stuff. But let's jump into assignment 3, and if there's anything else I forgot that Canvas will tell me about. Let's see here. All right, did that. Remember to do the attendance module, or the attendance if you're here on site. Online students, make sure to do your discussion post for the week. The class recording will be up tonight. It just has to upload to YouTube when we're done. All right, assignment 3. Also the optional poll. So again, I never actually talked about it. So last week, so I apologize really a lot for the technical difficulties with the delay in the recording and how the one recording that I did upload was kind of off sync with the audio. So I learned a valuable lesson. We can't record over a remote connection and expect it to not have issues. Basically, it was Milwaukee froze over that day, so I wasn't going out any more than you guys were. So I had to remote it into my work computer to try and record it, and terrible things happened. So I apologize for that. Hopefully we got through it. Hopefully you were still. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out on any of the content. That pre-recording is not old at all. I literally recorded it like the last month, like I think in December, because it was for some other thing that we had going on. So the information was all the same. You all did fine on the assignment, so I think it worked out. But again, I do apologize. Kind of got thrown off beat because of the snowstorm. So hopefully we're back on it and we'll be good going forward. But yeah, so the class recording will be there for both the online and on-site classes to reference. The optional poll. So again, this is just completely optional. It's gonna be on every assignment. If you want to give feedback, just to rank the difficulty of the previous assignment, that would be great. So that way I can have stats and kind of know in general how much the class is kind of scaling as far as difficulty. Not required, but appreciated. And the example solution for my assignment 2 is here if you want to download and take a look at that. Let's look at assignment 3. First thing I'm going to do is pull up the example assignment 3, which can be found here at the bottom. So I can kind of have them open side by side here. Really, Canvas? That's how you're gonna do that? Better idea. Let's do this. Aha! Outsmarted you, Canvas. So this is an example of what your assignment 3 will be. Basically, it's going to have a similar index landing page that your assignment 2 had, just with a whole bunch more different links. So your index page is going to have a link to all the various PHP files that we're going to talk about. You need to add your name in the heading, use some CSS, one table, colored background. Again, same requirements as assignment 2. The index page is basically the same, with the exception of there's going to be more things you're linking to. Shocker, you're going to be linking to examples of the various things we talked about today. So first one you need to do, for all of the following PHP pages, you need to have at least a PHP comment on each one of them. You need to have the proper HTML elements, and it needs to run properly with no error messages when I go to the page. If any one of those is not true, you're going to lose points on it. First one is called escape.php, which basically says provide an example using the PHP escape slash and a few lines of code. Explain what the escape slash does by writing a few lines of text in the regular HTML page. So either in like an H tag or a paragraph tag, or just throw it onto the page. Whatever it is, you just need to have a couple of sentences explain to me in plain English that you understand what the escape character and escape slash does. Prove to me that you actually understand what you're doing and that you didn't just copy and paste my example, and that'll make me feel better about going forward. Part C. So pause on this for a second. So a good question that a couple of you guys had, because again I got thrown off last week and I didn't mention it because it was the pre-recorded lecture. Since PHP, you can't see the source code on the outputted web server. So like here, if I hit Control-U, I don't actually see any PHP. I just see the outputted HTML. A good question is, how do I grade your stuff? Do I just look at it and be like, yeah, I trust them. They probably did it. No, I don't do that. I'm an administrator on the web server. So what I do is I go look at your source code on the actual web server. So I have access to look at all your stuff. Also, insert warning here about if you're going to try and like bypass anything. I can see timestamps. I have access to logs. I will pull them. I don't go mano a mano on trying to like forensically try and sneak your stuff or whatever. You'll lose every time. Oh, I swear I didn't. I turned it in on time. But yeah, no, I've got logs and IP addresses and video cameras saying otherwise. I mean, most of that was true. Regardless, that all being said, for assignments 2 and every assignment after this assignment, so assignments 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, that is 100% true. I just go look at your source code. It's quick enough. I go do it, and it's just easy. So that way you guys just have to submit the URL for your assignments. Assignment 3 is the one exception to that, because each one of your assignments has like a bajillion files in it. It has 3, 6, 7, 8, it has 9 files in it. That takes forever for me to go and look at each file individually on the web server. So this is the 1 week where I ask you guys to do something different. And again, I know it's weird because we have only had 1 week of it being the regular way, but just trust me, this is going to be the 1 week where it's going to be different, and then every week after it's the same, where I'll just go look at your source code on the server. For this assignment, I ask you to embed a screenshot of your source code in your assignment. So if I go here to the example, this is what I see. Wow, that is very big. Doesn't need, size doesn't matter. Basically up here is we have that same example from the PowerPoint that basically it was an example of those escape characters. You would normally then have a sentence that was actually explaining what the escape slash does, and then you have a screenshot of your code. The important part is the PHP block. If you happen to crop off the top HTML and the bottom part, that's okay. I'm looking at your PHP is the important part. And it just saves me, I timed it, it literally will save me, how many students in this one? It'll save me about like 6 hours. Not even joking. Like, because going through every single one of the files it'll make my life a lot easier and put me in a much better mood when I'm grading your stuff. Doesn't everybody want that? But regardless, so for this assignment, you need to have those 3 things for each one of these. You need to have an example showing the concept. You need to have a plain text explanation of what it is, and then a screenshot of your source code. It's at this point normally where I show how to do. I normally will just, I'm not even going to ask because I know some people kind of get embarrassed with it. In the offhand chance you don't know how to take a screenshot on your machine, Google's a great resource. If not, the snipping tool. If you go to the Windows key in the bottom left and type in snip, you get something called snip. Hit new, and it'll allow you to drag and take a nice little screenshot of whatever code you're doing, and you can hit the little save icon and save it type of thing. So let's take a look at the outputted source code of this page. Again, you won't see any PHP here, but how I actually put that image on this page, so again, going back to your 240 days, is I just used an image tag, give it the source of then whatever the name of the picture was. So your guys's assignment is probably going to have all the PHP files, and then also a bunch of different bunch of pictures, JPEGs or PNGs here as well that you call in your code. I skimmed it a little bit for the example. You'll notice for all these, it's the same screenshot because I'm not actually giving you screenshots of code. So I only have the one picture here. You will have one picture for each one of those with your code. Does that make sense? Like the screenshot aspect, we all good on that? That's new this semester. That's why I'm kind of dwelling on it a little bit more than probably necessary. Okay, I really appreciate it. Again, especially now that I know that I'm doing this as I have a full-time job as well. I would really appreciate it if we do it just for this 1 week, and then after that, I'll go back to snooping on your source code and looking at timestamps like normal. That being said, if I have suspicion, I will go pull up the timestamps this assignment as well. Don't try anything funky. Few have tried, all have lost. Let's see here. Pull it back. Where'd it go? Seriously, where did it just go? Oh, here it is. All right. So that's what you need for escape. I will say, please read through these carefully. They're generally the same concept for all of them. You need to have the example, the explanation, and the screenshot. But some of them have a little different. So please make sure you're going through and like checking them off as you go through. We'll go through them right now together and make sure we catch any pitfalls. I'm not trying to be tricky. I'm not trying to like have sneaky like, haha, oh you missed that thing, so you lose points. I want you guys to be successful, but if you don't do something in the assignment, I have to dock you points out of fairness to everybody. All right, next one, quotes. Provide an example using both single and double quotation marks. Then explain the difference between single and double quotation marks. Prove to me you understand the difference. Don't just copy and paste the bullet point from PowerPoint. Explain to me in your own words the difference between single and double quotation marks. Embed an image of your source code. Example of that. So like, again, I basically just kind of did the PowerPoint examples. Make sure you change them for yours, and then again, put it this way: the closer your assignment is to the PowerPoint examples, the better your explanation better be. Because you can either show me by doing a cool, like your own example, prove to me that you know how to use it, or if you just basically copy and paste my example and change one letter, you best have a good explanation explaining to me that you actually do know what the difference is. Predefined function. Please provide an example of at least two. I'm going to say this once more. Every semester, someone doesn't do that. 2 predefined variables. What will happen if you just do an example of 1 predefined variable? Plot twist, you will lose points. Please show an example of at least 2 predefined variables. Again, the example we had in the PowerPoint had 3. Explain what predefined variables are, and then embed a picture of your source code. PHP page called math.php. Please show at least 5 examples of arithmetic operators. So show 5 math examples. They can be the same, different. Just show 5 different math examples. This one's a little less on the explain side, just more of a, just for each one of the operators you used, explain what that operator does. Again, this one's going to be smaller. It's fine to say like, the addition operator adds the number. You know, that one's I'm a little less picky on. I assume you guys all know what addition means, but still, make sure you have the explanation for each of the 5 operators you're using, and embed a image of your source code. Constant. Provide an example of two examples of constants. Explain why constraints. That should say constants. Explain what constants are and how they differ from variables by writing a few lines in the HTML page. So again, have the PHP, and then just have a regular HTML explaining what the difference between constants and variables are. Functions. This one seems to trip people up because unlike all the previous one, where it has 3 parts, this one has 4 parts. Part 1, or Part A. Provide an example of a built-in function. Okay? Can someone give me an example of a built-in function? What's one of the ones we've used? So that's actually going to be one of the predefined variables, not so much functions. What's an example of a built-in function we've used? PHP info, that's one. The one in the PowerPoint and the one kind of in my example was the string length counter, so it like counts the length of the string. Both those are fine examples. I would probably warn against using the PHP info as your built-in one. I don't know how that would go with having the rest of your stuff. It might shove it at the bottom of it, but I'd be afraid that it would overwrite it. So you're welcome to try it and see, but you might be safe to just look up a random other built-in PHP function to show that. In addition to a built-in function, you need to show a user-defined function. For some reason, it seems to every semester, a couple people will just do one or the other. You need to have both. So then you need to have an example. You need to define your own function and then show it being used, and then explain how functions work. You explain how they work, what's the difference between the two, just kind of, again, prove to me that you actually understand these concepts, and embed an image of your source code. Any questions so far? I'm kind of going through these quick, I'm realizing. Quick. Some of you are like, oh my god, he's going at a snail's pace. Thorough is the word I like to think. We're almost there. Conditions. Provide 2 examples of an if-else statement, so provide 2 different if-else statements. You are allowed to do an if-else, if-else, if-else combo is fine for that, just as long as it has an if and an else, it counts. So 2 examples of those, and an example of a case or switch statement. So provide both if-else and also a switch or case statement. Explain how conditions work. Prove to me you understand how they are used with PHP. Image of your source code. All right, the last one. Form.php. So a couple parts to this. So one is to create a basic HTML form. So again, that's if you look at the PowerPoint, like something similar to this, where it's got the open and closing form tags and a bunch of input tags, and make sure that it has at least one of the following. It has a text field, it has a text area. So for those of you who don't remember, a text area is kind of like the comment box equivalent, so you can do like this to it. A set of radio buttons. When I mean a set, I mean so they're paired together. If you don't remember how to do that, go review and look up either last week's HTML review or look online. a checkbox, at least one checkbox. I'm actually missing that in my example. Oops. A drop-down menu. A submit button that takes you to any working website. So what am I going to edit to make that work? How do I make the submit buttons do that? Go to a working website. What am I going to edit to make that work? The action, the form action. So basically, this is where you're going to we're all going to send junk data to Google until they ban us. No, don't do that. But basically, you need to have a working submit button that when I click it, it sends the data somewhere. In this case, it sends it to UWM. All right. This is the tricky part of, that's not the right way to say it. This is the catch with this one. Everything up to this point is pretty, again, that's a basic HTML form. This is the part of where I'm going to try and have you guys review something from your 240s class, because it's going to help us next week. You need to make each of the above parts have a default value. So what I mean by that is, so when I first come to this page, so if I just go back to it, you'll notice everyth's already filled out with the default entry. This first part already has a default name, a default email, one radio button's already selected. Do me a favor, just make my life easy. When you have your default drop-down menu selected, don't make it the first one, make it like one of the other ones. That way it's very clear that you made it a default entry and it wasn't just showing up because that's the top one of the list. That'd be great. Not required, 'cause it's not on the assignment, but that would be appreciated. And then the comment has a default comment in it, and the checkbox will be checked, at least one of them will be checked by default. The reason why I have you do that, it'll help next week. Just trust me on that. You might need to Google and refresh yourself how to do that. Looking at the HTML source code of my sample will probably help as well, because again, that's not PHP, that's just regular HTML. But you need to make sure that you're having default entries for all of these. And then again, embed an image of your source code. Any questions on the form? Requirements for that? Again, have the assignment in front of you, check off each one, make sure you're doing it all. If you do everything, this is a pretty straightforward assignment where you should know if you got 100% on it because you did everything, so you know you got it. Same old copy-paste thing about the requirements and what I grade on. Extra credit for this week. So this week is worth 4 extra credit points. Ooh, because it actually uses some PHP. So basically, the optional challenge extra credit is to implement the following feature into your assignment. Please note that all 3 of these need to be done in order to get the extra credit. It's not like the previous ones where if you answered one of the 3 extra credits, you got one of the 3 extra credit points. These are 3 requirements. If you just take them out, they get really weird. Like, it's 3 requirements to do 1 feature to get 4 extra credit points. Give each page in the assignment a different page title so it shows up in the tab. So this is the example of what I mean by tab. So like here, the page title of this Canvas page is Assignment 3. This one's Web Application Development. This one's University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Okay? You'll have to go remember how you did that in regular HTML. But you need to set each page title using only PHP. The hint for that is to use a PHP variable called title or page title or something like that. And you need to set this page title using only PHP. No plain HTML text between the opening and closing title tags. So if you can figure out how to do that, you'll get 4 extra credit. And yeah, and then same thing as always for the extra credit. Please add a comment to your submission saying I did the extra credit so I know to look for it. I was going to quick mention last week's extra credit. Because most people who attempted it did it right. There were a couple variations of incorrect answers, so I was going to quick go over those. Alright, so all of these are basically things that can be found on your PHP info page if you're having difficulty finding them. So if I go pull up a random from assignment 2, my PHP info page. So what version of PHP is running on your web space? Well, can anyone take a guess from what's on the screen? Exactly, it's right there for you. Yeah, so that's pretty easy. What is the maximum upload size for uploading a file on your web space? So again, if I hit Control F and kind of start looking, searching for things that are probably going to be around that. So I'm going to search like upload. Oops. Well, no, not that. That just means we're allowed to upload. Max file upload. Some people wrote this down. No, this is how many files you can upload at once. Like the user can upload to your web server, so that's not right. There it is. Upload max file size, 128 megs. So another answer I saw with it was somewhere around the realm of like 4.75 gigabytes. So where people were getting that answer, at least one person who got that answer, was within cPanel. If you went to like the file upload button, that's what it says. Like, oh, the maximum you can upload to your web space, or like the maximum you have left in your web space is 4.75 gigabytes. That's in reference to just how much space is left on your web server. That doesn't actually have anything to do with the maximum upload size for a file on your web space. The difference there being is that you're not actually, the question is asking like, if you were to create like a form upload on your web space, like what's the maximum file size a user could upload to your website? Whereas the cPanel little dialog box is talking about you logged in as an administrator to the cPanel dashboard can have this much space left and can upload this much space left of files. So again, different instances. So I know a couple people had that one kind of going for that, but what we were looking for is the max upload size for uploading a file, which is 128 megs. Last one, what is the version of the extension file info? Well, control F file info, and we see that it's 1.05. All right. Let's go back to. Talked about that. Last call for the, make sure you do the attendance module. It's how you get credit for being in class. Do I have a password on that one? I don't think I have a password. Nope, you're good. I just have the IP lock. I was going to say, how did that not come up by this point? But, all right. Any questions? Assignment 3? Anything in general? We all good? All right, you're free to go. If you have any questions, feel free to come up and talk to me. I will stay probably until 8 if you guys wanted to work on your assignments, and get them done. I can be here and answer questions. I know everyone will just run out the door anyway, so have a great week.